Okay, so first order of business. Let's shift. I'd like to shift your attention to our classroom. There hasn't been many changes here, but hang on, I think I'm having back-end issues again with my mouse. Okay, good. That should be working. There you go. So, well, actually, first of all, raise of hands, please, if any of you attended the Four-Dimensional Cities lecture by Professor Marshall. Anyone? Raise your hands, virtual raise of hands if anyone attended this. Apparently not. That's okay. I didn't. I actually registered. I had this in my calendar, and somehow I actually forgot about this as well. So, and besides, I won't be quizzing you. I won't be quizzing you on this lecture. So, all good. Okay. The only changes I've made to our classroom are the section on week 6. I've added a poster submission link for you to submit your final posters. Now the final poster should be submitted on week 9. We are on week 7 at the moment. So next week we will have a presentation of findings. What did you find? What did you find? And perhaps me and or other members of our class will give constructive feedback with regards to how you should approach the assignment, perhaps feedback on your poster and everything, and then you would have subsequently you would have time to revise your poster and then submit it on week 9. So the presentation will replace the mid-semester exam. The presentation will be replacing the exam, and the poster will be the second evaluation component for this course. So submit your poster on week 9. That's 2 weeks from now. And as for week 6, or the survey week, I'd like you to access the week 7 segment, diachronic analysis for urban studies. Have a look at the week 7 reference folder and explore and access the resources here. You will need to access these resources before you can engage in the discussion forum. So after you access these resources, after you have read through them, have a look at the forum. The forum is a substitute for the survey week on week 6. So there is no blank week in the SE Presency. So what is diachronic analysis? Diachronic analysis is actually the study of changes in a phenomenon over time. It is actually a linguistics tool, but you can sort of use this to help you understand urban morphology or settlement morphology. After you've read the references in the reference folder and perhaps access the video provided, ask yourselves these questions. What does linguistics have to do with understanding urban morphology, and how can you use this analytical approach to read the city? So ponder these questions together and more. And so you may need to do a further research on diachronic analysis and what diachronic analysis is, and then find out how it helps you understand urban form, urban morphology, and more importantly, how do you think this form of analysis can help you understand your location, the location of choice for your assignment? If you, and I suspect this for all the groups, you didn't use the diachronic approach, that's okay. But just imagine if you were using the diachronic approach, how could this approach have helped you with your assignment? And so share your thoughts and findings in the forum. And to do that, so your post in the forum should follow, I'll share these guidelines with you as well, should follow this model of approach. So you should have a PDF document appearing on your screen right now. Panduan penulisan reflektif menggunakan model STAR-L. So a reflective writing guidelines using the STAR-L model. I like to use this. I'm having back-end issues. I keep having back-end issues with my equipment. There we go. So the STAR is an acronym for situation, task, or target, action, result, and lessons learned. Well, here, in your post in the forum should describe the situation. So what's the situation that you're facing at the moment? The situation you're facing at the moment is your assignment. Describe your assignment. What should you do in your own words? What you should do? What is asked? Perhaps you need to reflect on the terms of reference in your assignment. And what is the target, or what is the purpose of the assignment? What is the purpose of the assignment is to build or to understand morphology. And you can also, in the situation, you can also describe what diachronic analysis is, and your understanding of the diachronic analysis, and your target or your assignment's purpose is to understand urban form and so on. And what are the actions? What are the the diachronic analysis is here. Should be in the action section of the action bit. What is diachronic analysis? What are the steps in doing the diachronic analysis, and what is the expected result if you had employed diachronic analysis in your assignment? And then a reflection of the lessons learned. If we had used diachronic analysis, then we would have blah blah blah, that sort of thing. Some tips. I've added some tips underneath for you to reflect on and perhaps use. So that's more or less the STAR-L framework for reflective writing. Does it have to follow the exact same systematics? I know a lot of the students in our department like to say, harus mengikuti sistematika seperti itu, Pak. No, it doesn't have to follow the exact same layout, the exact same order of things, but it's just it's just that this is the framework to help you organize your thoughts and to give you an idea of what you should write about. If you don't want to follow this exactly, per step, that's fine. You want to describe the situation first, and then the action, and then the task. That's okay. It doesn't have to be situation, task, action, and so on. It just happens to be that star is a bit easier to remember rather than SATR whatever. So feel free to express yourselves in different ways. But the forum is an individual activity. So please engage and contribute to the forum. I can certainly use extra items for to help me with the evaluation of your progress. Okay, right. So with regards to the assignment submission and the forum, do you have any questions or comments before we move on? I take that silence as a I'll take it as a yes, sir. We understand exactly what you mean, and you can expect our best performance in the assignment and the forum. Right. So let's get on with today's agenda then. Now, today we'll talk about well, picking up where we left off last 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the tangible determinants of urban form or settlement morphology. Now we'll talk about the intangible determinants of morphology. So as you have seen in our classroom, we've listed several intangible determinants of morphology: social determinants, cultural determinants, political determinants, and economic determinants. And we'll go over these factors today. So first of all, the social determinants. I have mentioned previously that the built environment, if you remember our introduction to built environment course, that the built environment is a container of activities, and usually these containers are a reflection of our requirements, of our needs for social interaction. And then we build these containers the way we think it would best serve our social interaction needs. But subsequently, as time goes by, these containers subsequently influence the way we interact with one another. And some of the factors that influence the social interaction are interconnected neighborhoods, the interconnectedness of places, compactness, mix of use, and housing or activity diversity. Now, first, with interconnectedness, for example, if we look at if we look at a cluster of housing or residential buildings, let's say in a kampong or in a housing complex, but not the gated community type. So older housing complex before gated communities were introduced. You can see how in those housing districts or housing communities or residential communities, that there is a nice flow. Every ERTE and ERWE are connected by the streets, by the network of streets. Let's say, for example, one ERTE decided to fence themselves off. They introduced portals or gates at the end, just at the end of their streets. They have segregated. By doing so, they have segregated themselves from the rest of the community. Although they have not segregated themselves, they haven't separated themselves spatially because they're still physically there, right next to the other neighborhood units. But they have segregated themselves by limiting access or limiting the connection to other neighborhoods. So, and by doing so, they have, in a way, in a sense, they have sort of established a certain distance, social distance from other neighborhood units. So interconnectedness affects the way one individual or one community interacts with others. Second, second is compactness. We can't deny the fact that physical distance influence social coherence and social bonds. So imagine yourselves living in an acreage where your nearest neighbor may be 2 kilometers away or 3 kilometers away, and you're connected to your neighbors by rural roads. And so if you want to invite your neighbors over for dinner, for example, then it would be quite an effort for them to come to your place, and vice versa. So physical distance do also have an influence in the way people interact, and thus influence their social bonds and ties with one another. And so compactness, the closer they are physically together, then the tighter the social bond. If you mix in economic conditions or economic factors into this, then you will perhaps have you will also influence the social bond. Take for example gated communities with large plots of land, maybe luxury houses. They're not exactly like acreages where one house is 10 miles away from the nearest neighbor. They are right next door to each other, except that they occupy a large plot of land, let's say 400, 600 square meters, with big mansions. They may be in one cluster, but between one neighbor to another, they may not be as closely bonded or as tightly knit as communities in the kampungs, for example. Why? Let's throw in. I'm going to throw in a random economic variable that may influence this. Perhaps people in luxury houses have more than enough things to keep them busy in their own homes. If they want to interact socially with their friends, with their neighbors, they can just turn on FaceTime or whatever. They don't have to meet face to face. Or they can meet elsewhere. They can go out. So the social bonds, the social ties may not be as visible as, let's say, in the kampungs, where perhaps socially and economically they're more diverse, and perhaps some of the neighbors are better off than others. And so because they are closely closely situated together, they are very closely physically clustered together, and then they have this diversity of economic levels, and diversity of financial situations, diversity of social situations, and such, familial situations, and because they're close to each other, they would interact, and they would share with one another their resources, they would share their stories, they would share everything. And most of these interactions happen either in their front lawn, on the streets, or other public, semi-public spaces. So it's more evident, it is more visible. So in luxury compounds, it's as though nobody's on the streets, nobody's interacting with one another, and then you come to a conclusion that the social bonds and ties are not there. It's there, but it's perhaps not as visible as it is in the kampungs. So compactness influenced that. Mix of use. Absolutely, mix of use. If you look at kampung settlements, is there such thing as 100% residential kampung? I guess not. A lot of the times, you have neighbors who are maybe 1 or 2 houses away from you that open, or they run a warung. Be it that they're selling general groceries, so a general store, or perhaps they provide other services or other goods such as food or beverages, warung kopi, warung makan, and so on and so on. Generally, in very dense settlements, you will not find, or you will rarely find, one cluster of houses that is 100% housing. There is usually a good mix of one or two activities within that cluster, and that's a good thing, because these different functions foster movement. They encourage movement from one unit to another, because, well, I need to grab some stuff. I'm going to go to the neighbor's shop and buy something there, or perhaps I need to talk to one of my neighbors, or I need to talk to one of my neighbors, and let's talk at the local so-called pub. Di sini pub itu jadi warkop itu ya. Let's go to the local pub or the local warkop to talk, have conversations, discuss, and so on. So the mix of use is there. That mix of land use, mix activities. And then finally, housing diversity. Now, housing diversity here means the different types of housing, the different densities. For example, you could have the housing diversity is actually a very open, a very wide term. It could refer to the diversity in ownership, for example. If let's say if let's reflect on ITS and the surrounding areas where you have you have a good mix of permanent dwellers and temporary dwellers. And so the social ties and the social bonds between people there, and the stories they share also influence this interaction between the permanent dwellers and the temporary dwellers. And so that is an illustration of how housing diversity in the form of ownership diversity, or the variety of ownership, of residential ownership or residential tenancy, influences the social interaction, and perhaps that is then reflected on the way the built environment is built, or it influences housing provision. Perhaps there are some multi-level or multi-dwelling units, or multiple inhabitant dwelling units, such as kos-kosan. There are single dwelling units, maybe kontraan, and so on. So social interaction is then reflected, social needs are then reflected through the built environment. And then there are cultural, coming back to this first. And so these four factors then influence the preferred form of buildings. So one cluster of housing may perhaps prefer a certain form of building, certain building forms than others. Kampungs, because they're mostly smaller plots of land, then perhaps the ideal building form would be a single or two-story building with to accommodate their needs. And then at some point, perhaps the built environment, or the built environment will then decay. And no, the decay of social system is not the decay of social system is perhaps an illustration that best describe this would be, if you think back to the early industrial revolution in the 1800s, European industrial revolution in the 1800s, where cities were basically death traps because of the heavy and unregulated mix of production activities and housing, and poor sanitation exacerbated the situation. So there's industrial pollution, people living with industrial pollution, and then exacerbated with poor sanitation. Cities in the 1800s, European cities in the 1800s during the industrial revolutions were basically death traps and very unhealthy places to live. So the physical environment itself is decaying, and because of this unhealthy mix of different functions of polar opposite activities, residential and manufacture mixed together, there's also a degree of decay in the social norms and the social values of cities of the 1800s. And so there is a will or a push to move to a different place in search of a better in search of better living conditions, and thus contributing to the expansion of cities. And so the decay of social system, the decay of the environment also then contributes to the contributes or influences the urban form. And then perhaps some physical renewal may be conducted to then improve the conditions within cities, and thus bringing people back into the city center. The next factor, or the next determinant, is cultural determinants. Quality urban environments are shaped by culture. And then, of course, the political determinants. We can't deny the fact that cities or our settlements are a product of political will, product of political forces, and of course the product of economic capacity and other economic forces. Let's start with the I've given you an explanation of or an illustration of the social determinants. Let's have a look at culture. Culture itself, and how culture then influences urban form or settlement patterns, settlement form. First of all, what is culture? It is a set of societal norms that influence a society's way of life and how they conduct or go about their daily activities, their daily lives. And these societal norms are often reflected in the way they build their settlements, not necessarily cities, but their settlements in general. And where do these norms come from? Well, I can think of four. Origins of societal norms. First, they can be a transcendental understanding of cosmology and rituals. That's where they come from. Settlements are built to reflect the hierarchy of interaction between humans and a greater being, or a greater being of power. God, some people call it. Societal norms are also adopted from a community's way of life, and because of that cosmological and perhaps that cosmological relationship, and the rituals are then influenced or internalized into their way of life. Then the provision of built environment is a reflection of that relationship and their way of life. C, settlement culture that reflect their settlement hierarchy: village, town, regency, city. We have this exact hierarchy in our country: desa, or maybe dusun, desa, kabupaten, kota, more or less so. But this is more reflected in the way we administer our spatial denominations, spatial divisions. And lastly, local wisdom and local wisdom's role in maintaining and preserving the natural environment, which I will get into a little later. But local wisdom is usually a product of A and B. So the way communities, the way groups of people worship the Almighty One is then reflected through their way of life, and that is then internalized and becomes what is known as local wisdom. Now, local concepts. First and foremost, village settlements are the oldest form of organized housing in Indonesia. And I think villages are the norm when it comes to settlements in Asia, especially Southeast Asia. It is the norm rather than the exception. So because most of us, or most of the settlements, started out as village settlements, and so that's why urban settlements in Indonesia are still rooted in the rural traditions that are strongly influenced by agrarian structures and the spirit of communal support, or gotong royong, shapes our social lives. I think no matter how urban you are, no matter how urban you think your lifestyle is, I think there's a certain component, or there's a certain spark within ourselves that are still rooted in these rural traditions. So we've never known cities essentially until the European settlers arrived. They built the cities for us, and changing the way we think and the way we look at our the way we think about settlements, and the way we look at traditional settlements. This is an example of settlement hierarchy. In Tanah Toraja, the settlement hierarchy is based on scale. So an individual residence is known as a banua. A group of banuas is known as a tondok, or a village. And Talung Lembangna, or greater settlement, is an agglomeration, or a group of a number of villages. So, but I think, as far as I know, Talung Lembangna is limited to only three or four tondok. But correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is how we come to know. This is our cities, essentially. Well, not across the archipelago, of course, but this is one form of major settlement. So we have already in our traditional settlements patterns of this hierarchy of singular housing, single structures, multiple structures, and then a group and a group of multiple structures, and then multiple groups of multiple structures. But they have only become known as cities just at the turn of the 20th century, again built and developed by the Dutch colonial administration. So people in Toraja traditionally do not build urban settlements. It's possible that they did not view cities as a necessity prior to interacting with the outside world. So we have to thank the Dutch colonial government, Dutch colonial administration, for introducing cities to us, for better or for worse. And here is an example of local wisdom. For example, in Aceh, urban life actually flourished under the influence of the Islamic cultures coming especially from Gujarat and India. Now, urban settlement areas were not exactly in Aceh were not exactly centralistic, so to say. So it's not exactly oriented, although they had kings back then, but it is not it is not centralistic under the rule of the king, in the sense that the settlements or the urban settlement areas were traditionally not oriented towards the palace or anything. Within settlement units, they have what is known as kampong, which is another derivative or variation of kampong, but I think it's similar to the Toraja people, but here I'd like to highlight this the fact that the houses are basically stages on stilts, or known also as rumah panggung. Why am I saying? Why am I mentioning this as a form of local wisdom? Well, initially the houses are built on poles because they may be close to wetlands, and during the monsoon season the area floods. So the area floods, and when an area floods over time, or because of this, due to the cycle, then the ground beneath the house is almost always very very moist, and it contains a lot. It contains a lot of moisture, and because these houses were built, these are built using wood. Wood and moisture don't mix very well together. So the floors have to be raised, they have to be elevated, one, to avoid inundation, and two, to avoid excessive moisture coming from the ground below. Excessive moisture then leads to mold, and mold leads to respiratory problems in houses. So they didn't want that. So that's two of the reasons why they built their houses on stilts, or rumah panggung. They built this structure. Another cool feature of this structure is that it actually is a way of people giving back to the community. How can that be? Well, in front of the house is a street, or the network, part of the network of streets that connect one house to another. And that is obviously a public sphere. And building a house on your plot of land means that you're building a private space, and the space below the house is the semi-public space where you would perhaps hold ceremonies, selamatan, for example, gatherings with your neighbors, with the community, is then held within these spaces. So that's what I meant by giving back to the community, in the sense that you're giving a part of your private property back to the community for communal use. Such evidences of and evidence of this sort of interaction, or this sort of public, semi-public, and then private spheres is also evident in Java. If you get a chance to visit Borobudur, have a look at the reliefs, at the stone carvings along the walls. I don't quite remember which part of the temple, but have a look at the carvings, and you can see that it is also evident in Java that this sort of structure exists, and the way they use this structure for communal activities is depicted in one of the reliefs there, in one of the stone carvings there, where people gather around, underneath, or beneath a house. So the private sphere up here, semi-private down here, and the public sphere right in front of the door. Um, I don't want to get too architectural about this, but I think this is a good example of the hierarchy of um, a good example of the hierarchy of or the relationship between man and it and their creator, humans and their creator. In Java, I think the most a traditional form of settlement or of buildings of houses in Java is the joglo, rumah joglo. And how does this reflect man and God, or man and the creator? Well, the primary structure of a joglo is the pillars in the center of the in the center of the structure. The pillars themselves are known as soko. The columns, the pillars are known as soko. Soko in the center, in the middle, is usually called soko kuru. Soko kuru. Soko kuru are the main pillars holding the entire structure up. All the other pillars that surround the soko guru, the group of soko gurus, are known as soko anaan, soko anak, or soko murid. Most of the times they're called soko anak, so soko guru, soko anaan. That surround the primary structure, and these are the secondary structures. When these secondary structures fail, as long as the primary structure is still erect, then then perhaps the majority of the entire structure is still intact. And there are variations of the soko guru and soko anaan interaction, as illustrated in these diagrams here. And then, of course, there are different scales. That signify the different levels of importance of a structure. So the larger the guru, the larger the soko gurus are, the more soko anaan they have. And so that signifies, oh, this must be an important structure, like so. And that is again a reflection of how people in of the hierarchy. As you can see, the pillars shrink in size as the further away they are from the primary structure. And that sort of illustrates how the further you are away from the further you are from the Almighty, from the Creator, then the less significant you become, and that sort of thing, if that makes sense. But I think in Java, the traces or the seeds of urban settlement is evident, perhaps even more so than other places. If I'm not exactly a history buff, but if you look at kraton, or the Javanese palaces, and the way they are configured, spatially arranged spatially, the palace and the supporting and its supporting structures are the seeds of our urban settlements. In our neighboring village, in our neighboring island, we do have this traditional form of settlement, the Tanean Lanchang. I really love making this an example of traditional settlements, because it is it is so easy to read. Here we have houses in the middle, the kitchens, communal kitchens to the near the ends, and then we have the animal cages, kandang kandang kandang, across across from where the houses are. And here we have a structure or a house of worship, in this case a langgar here, and a water source, or maybe other structures, or maybe other functions are there as well. So here we have usually between one house or another, they still have a familial relationship there. So it is usually a Tanian Lanjang is occupied by an extended family, or a group of extended families, and they continue to grow as the extended families grow. Unfortunately, this form of settlement is still evident in Madura here and there, but unfortunately they've become more and more scarce, perhaps due to the fact that people are moving places, and they prefer a more modern form of settlement. But I guess, if we can actually build on these traditional forms, build on these traditional patterns, then perhaps we can find our own sort of national identity, so to say, for urban settlements. But of course, there are people who shun progress, who decide that who decide that they don't want to be part of any sort of progress, or any part of modernity. Kampung Baduy Dalam, for example, these people, they view progress, they view new technologies as something disruptive to nature. They prefer to work with nature rather than work against nature to build their settlements. Funny thing is, people from these sort of settlements who segregate themselves from modern day settlements, such as this is another example, Kampung Naga, who also segregate themselves from modern society. At the height of the pandemic, it was found that people from Kampung Naga and Kampung Baduy Dalam are actually not as susceptible to the coronavirus as those who live in modern urban settlements with obviously much better health facilities and such. Why? Well, because these two groups of people are basically isolated from the rest of the society. So they're actually quite safe. But as soon as one of them, but I figured as soon as one of them is infected by the virus, then perhaps the damages caused would be even greater than those who live in modern settlements with better access to better healthcare and such. I don't know if any of you are from out of town, or if any of you happen to have any experience with traditional forms of settlement, or if any of your ancestors may be coming from traditional settlements or traditional villages. In the other class, one of the students shared a story that their grandparents come from a fishing village, a very traditional fishing settlement in Tobelo. So, are any of you from the neighboring islands? Anyone? No, everyone's from Java, then I suppose, and perhaps your ancestors are from Java as well. So no variations there. Let's move on. Oh, yes, I had a hands up. I had a hand up. I think it was Richard. Can you then please tell us where you're from?
I'm from Kalimantan, sir.
Which part of Kalimantan?
Kalimantan Timur.
East. Okay. And what do you know about the traditional settlements in East Kalimantan?
I'm sorry, sir, but I don't really know any.
Well, okay. If you don't know of any traditional forms of settlements from East Kalimantan, then I suggest that you pick up a book, or search Wikipedia for traditional East Kalimantan settlement and see what you can find out. Because, well, again, I'm not the biggest history buff, but there is a lot to learn from traditional settlements, our ancestors' traditional settlements, and again, the local wisdom that is inherent in there. It should make for a very interesting investigation. There are some references that I've shared in the week 5 reference folder with regards to these intangible determinants of urban form. I suggest you have a look at them. And so let's move on. But thank you, Richard, for sharing. Another intangible form, or another intangible determinant of urban form, religion. What is a religious city? Well, a religious city is basically a city that ticks off these 5 criteria. A city that has a sacred dimension, a holy city whose physical structure depicts intense ritual activity, or a holy city whose physical structure accommodates intense ritual activities. Cities like Mecca, Jerusalem, are cities where basically world religions are born. A city of worship to major gods in certain beliefs, such as Ammon in Thebes, or Siva in Benares. Or a religious city is perhaps a city where the king or the ruler exerted influence and power by elaborating on cosmological meanings. For example, Jayavarman VII in Angkor Thom. We will have a look at Angkor Thom a little later on. I mentioned Mecca, and this is Mecca. And Mecca, as we all know, as most of us perhaps already know, it holds a very important place in Islam. It's the holiest city in all branches of the Islamic religion and its denominations. And the city derives its importance from the role it plays in the Hajj and the Umrah, and in the Umrah activities. This is the perfect example, if I may call it myself. This is the perfect example of a city that is built, or at least a city that is built, or at least a significant part of the city is built to accommodate intense intense worship ritual activities. I think it has gone so much that it is. I think the structure and the intensity of the construction activities there has gone to such a scale, such an extent that perhaps I don't know. But this is again, this is a very personal thing, because this is an intangible. We're talking about intangible determinants of urban form, but and it doesn't get more intangible as meaning. I think a lot of the meanings have been lost due to the intense construction activities. I think the local government there also views religious artifacts or cultural built heritage as something of very little significance or very little importance. So a lot of historic structures around the Grand Mosque have been demolished to make way for the expansion, for the never-ending expansion of this very grand mosque. So hundreds of years ago, a long time ago, it was a very simple structure consisting of the Kaaba, which serves as an orientation point for Muslims to pray towards. It basically tells that you should be praying facing this direction. But as time goes by, and as the number of pilgrims who engage in pilgrimage activities increase, the Grand Mosque continues to expand in ways that I think in ways that is unfathomable. You see where's the, okay, that's where the two hills are. A little less than 20 years ago, there used to be high rises right here, where the red pointer is. There used to be high rises there, and right here there used to be traditional markets as well, but it's all gone now. It's all gone and now become part of the extension of the Grand Mosque. Yeah, but it's an unbelievably it's an unbelievable scale of expansion. I don't think you can exhibit anywhere anything like this anywhere else in the world. Maybe in China, but not for religious purposes, of course. Another example of a religious city, the Vatican City. Now, the territory of the Vatican City is part of the Vatican Hill and of the adjacent former Vatican Fields. It is in this territory that the Basilica San Pietro, St. Peter's Basilisk, and the Apostolic Palace, the Sistine Chapel, and other museums were built, along with various other buildings. I think the area was part of the Roman Rione, or the Roman district of Borgo, until the early 1930s, I think, anywhere between the 20s and the 30s. And then it segregates itself from the city. Well, it doesn't really segregate itself from the city. It's just a separate administration. That's all there is, actually. It is still part of the city, although you can see along these lines here that they have erected walls to separate itself from the greater city of Rome. here's a much better illustration of the Vatican City's administrative borders. I think most of the museums, the Apostolic Palace, St. Peter's Basilisk, they're open to the public. I'm not sure about the gardens in the back. Last time I was there, I was there only for the basilisk and the museums, and I think the Sistine Chapel as well. But I didn't really get to see the lawns in the back. And then it's this particular city, Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world. It is considered as a holy city to the three major Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Both Israel and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. So to say, yes, I know I know what you're thinking, but Israel isn't there Tel Aviv? Yeah, but they sort of claim Jerusalem as their spiritual capital, so to say. And so far, Israel maintains its primary governmental institutions here, and the state of Palestine also ultimately sees this place as its seat of power. Unfortunately, neither claim is widely recognized internationally for obvious reasons. But throughout its long history, Jerusalem has been destroyed at least twice. It's been besieged multiple times. It's been captured, recaptured more than a handful of times. It's been attacked multiple times as well. But there's, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure which part of this picture depicts the first signs of settlement. I think the first signs of settlement in Jerusalem first appeared in the 4th millennium BCE. In the shape of encampments and the encampments of nomadic shepherds. But yeah, it's one place. It's one of those places where it's one of those places I have my bucket list of places to visit. But for obvious political and safety reasons, I have never set foot. In Jerusalem until today. To this day, sorry, to this day. Next is the Burmese city of Bagan. Bagan is an ancient city and a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Mandalay region of Myanmar or Burma. Burma or Myanmar, Myanmar or Burma. From between the 9th and the 13th centuries, this particular city was the capital of the pagan kingdom, the first kingdom that unified the regions that would later constitute Myanmar. During the kingdom's height, between 11th and 13th centuries, I think there were more than 10,000 Buddhist temples, pagodas, and monasteries that were constructed in the Bagan Plains alone. Today, only about 2,200 temples and pagodas survive, but this is one of the reasons why this area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, because this particular area houses the most Buddhist structures. So it stands out for the sheer number of religious edifices or the religious artifacts of Myanmar. But not only that, I think the architecture of the buildings and their influence towards the Burmese temple design is actually evident. So Bagan is now known as a huge collection of very large religious artifacts. Another religious city, Angkor Thom. Angkor Thom quite literally translates into great city. It is located in present-day Cambodia. It was the last and perhaps the most enduring capital city of the Khmer Empire. It was established in the late, I don't know, 11th or 12th century by King Jayavarman VII. It covers an area of about nine square kilometers, I think 3 by 3 kilometers, so 9 square kilometers. And within it, there are several monuments from earlier eras as well as those established by Jayavarman's state temple. Jayavarman and his successors. So at the center of the city is Jayavarman's state temple, or known as the Bayon, there, and other major sites clustered around around Victory Square. That's the Victory Gates. I think that would be the Victory Square should be somewhere here. Yeah, Victory Square is immediately to the north, I think. The city lies on the west bank of a river that I cannot really pronounce. But yeah, it is the south gate here is okay. The south gate here is the is around north, about a few kilometers north of the entrance to Angkor Wat. So Angkor Thom is not to be confused with Angkor Wat. That's two different sites altogether. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there are multiple faces decorating the structure, or decorating the towers. I think there are about well, I don't know. There are several faces that adorn these towers. Those faces may represent the king himself, or perhaps they may also represent the different faces of Buddha. I'm not really sure, but it is quite a sight to behold, I suppose. And let's just leave it there. This is a closer look at the Angkor Temple complex, where you can see the relative position between, this is the Angkor Thom, and Angkor Wat is up here, B, and then there are other temples here and there as well. But you know what? Religious cities or religious cities do not only exist in Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. There are also evidence of religious cities in Europe, or in the global West. This is a picture of Scherpenheuvel, or in English, Sharp Hill. This is the most important pilgrimage site for Roman Catholics in Belgium. It's about 50 kilometers east of Brussels. Now, the origins of the city dates back to the pagan worship that's still survives until the Middle Ages, and it is around. This particular site is built around a holy oak tree that used to occupy this hilltop. Now the tree happened to grow in a cross shape, and therefore people then Christianized it with the statue of the Holy Mary. There's a legend has it that around the 16th century, so around the 1500s, the Virgin Mary performed a miracle there, freezing into place a shepherd boy who tried to take home the small statue. But again, these stories of miracles are yet to be investigated as for evidence-wise. So, because of that miracle, a flood of devoted pilgrims from the surrounding areas come to the tree to pray for health and recovery of their loved ones. So quite an interesting sight, I reckon. The whole city was an allegory, an allegorical homage to the Mother of God, symbolizing her eternal virginity, so to say. There are seven lanes. If you can see these lanes, 7 lanes that point towards the church in the middle. So the holy oak tree is now gone, I think replaced by the chapel. And the 7 lanes then form a 7-pointed star, which stands for the abundance of God's mercy. And I'll just leave it at that. Next is Saint Riquia, or Centula or Centulum. Which was founded in the year 625 by Ricarius, the son of the governor of the town, when the town was within a kingdom known as the Merovingian kingdom. From its name, Saint Riquia, it's somewhere in France. So it was built in around that time, the year 625, until the year 881, or the early 9th century, where Northmen burnt the abbey, destroyed destroyed most of the church, and then it was rebuilt in the Middle Ages on a smaller scale, until it was then continued to expand until it became what it is today. So next, the next few slides, I'll share with you how politics influence urban morphology. Cities first emerged as a complex form or complex forms of social and political organization, and it's something that you can't really deny. You can't deny the fact that cities are a container of different social and political organizations. It is basically an agglomeration of different social and political organizations, whether we like it or not. And first, the earliest cities emerged in the valleys of Euphrates and along the Tigris, in the Tigris Valley, along the Nile River, the Huanghe River, and the Yangtze River. So cities originally popped up in the Middle East and somewhere in East Asia. And these early cities broke dramatically with the patterns of tribal and
tribal life and rural societies from which they originated. And it had evolved so much that um, that it that the origins or the original tribes from which they sprang is no longer recognizable. The political forces of the cities are brought by either their kings, their warlords or commanders, or perhaps by religious leaders. And there are cities that are oriented towards the people. So if a city is heavily influenced by their kings, then the city is usually oriented towards the heart of the kingdom. The palace becomes central to the city's growth. Commanders or warlords design their settlements to support military activities and mobility. Usually, the Roman Empire, when they come to conquer an area, they would demolish they would demolish the area that they conquered, and then reconfigure their spatial configuration to support military mobilization. So it's more of so the cities, their settlements are then perhaps arranged in a way to help them expand the kingdom, so to easily mobilize their troops and forces. If a city is heavily influenced by a certain group of people or by a certain religion, then the religious city is oriented towards usually oriented towards religious sites, which I illustrated in Sharp Hill. People as the central power. The city is designed to fulfill people's needs. This is very evident in this is actually very evident in socialist countries. Let's say China during the Cultural Revolution, spearheaded by Chairman Mao Zedong, and it is also evident in places like North Korea. But sir, in North Korea, there's poverty abound. Well, their cities are initially designed to fulfill people's needs through the layout and segregation, the way they lay out and segregate functions in the city. But these subdivisions are then used to control people's mobility, movement, and their source of income, and so on and so forth. So the socialist city may be sort of designed, or they look as if they're designed for to fulfill people's needs, but ultimately, I think it's the dictatorship that then prevails, and you can't really just look at it. You can't really just look at it from one perspective. I think you have to look at it holistically. How these factors influence, and then but ultimately there are other factors beyond that influence the daily management and running of the city. An example of city that orients itself towards its king or the ruler, Persepolis, which was built in 500 BC. It was built during the reign of Darius to Xerxes. The floor plan of the structure with multiple pillars is I guess the more pillars indicate the higher the significance of the but yeah, the significance of the structure. And here's the mural or relief of King Xerxes and King Xerxes the Great and his army. The ruins are still evident, and I think you can still visit Persepolis in Persia today. Palma Nova. Palma Nova is an example of a city built by a warlord for military purposes, mobility purposes, to mobilize military forces. This is a town and a commune in northeast Italy. This is the best example, I think, of a star fort of the late Renaissance period, which was built by the Venetian Republic in the 1500s. This is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and I think rightly so, because it is. I mean, just look at it. And then the next is the Acropolis of Athens, an ancient citadel. Acropolises are usually situated on a rocky outcrop, not only of Athens but of other across other cities in ancient Greece as well. This is, I think, yeah, the word Acropolis is from the Greek words akron, which means the highest point or the extremity, and polis or city. And the term Acropolis is generic, and there are many other acropolis across Greece. So not only one in Athens, but also in other cities as well. The entrance to an acropolis was a monumental gateway termed the Propylaea. To the south of the entrance is a temple of where's the number 6 temple of Athena Nike, right there. At the center of the Acropolis is, of course, the Parthenon, or the Temple of Athena, Parthenos, or Athena the Virgin. But yeah, the seemingly haphazard layout is a result, I think, of the topography itself. It doesn't look at all symmetrical. But there is a much deeper meaning as to how and why these structures are situated the way they are. Another form of how politics influence the shape of the city is evident in Forum Romanum, the Roman Forum. It's a rectangular forum or rectangular plaza surrounded by the other ruins of several important ancient government buildings at the center of the city of Rome. It is still there. It lies in ruins. Yeah, there are also other archaic shrines. I don't really remember where, but there are plenty of shrines as well in and across the forum, the Roman Forum, where the Senate, the Republican government itself began. So yeah, I think that's all the illustrations I have for how culture and how culture and politics and religion influence the influence the urban form. I don't really have an illustration of how economic forces form a city or influences the urban form. I guess you can have a look at several modern cities and reflect on that to grasp to try and grasp how economic forces shape shape settlements. So yeah, but before I end this, perhaps as you some of you came in a little later, so as some of you may be marking your attendance, if you have any comments or questions with regards to the oh god, sorry, looks like my session is timed out. I hope I can directly display the QR code. Apparently not. But yeah, let's just go back to back-end issues again. So yeah, here we go. So while some of you are marking your attendance, if you have any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to raise your hand or to raise your hand virtually or unmute yourselves immediately. If you have any questions pertaining to the assignment, you may also deliver your question now. One more thing, I am more than happy prior to your presentation. I am more than happy to provide a consultation. And otherwise, if let's get one thing clear, you don't have to create slides for your presentation, but if you feel more comfortable to present your findings using PowerPoint slides, then you're more than welcome to do so for next week's presentation. If you feel like you need to consult with me about what to present, again, I'm more than welcome to oblige. Anytime next week before you actually present your work. As some of you may already know, we are now in day 3, the final day of our accreditation audit. So most, if not all, of our resources are pulled towards the accreditation efforts. And just for your information, day 1 and day 2 has gone quite well so far. We're looking forward to a fruitful and hopefully a very positive day 3. That way, once we've secured accreditation, that is also something that will be reflected on your official documentation when you graduate from our department in the future. So yeah, fingers crossed for that, for all our efforts. And yeah, once again, coming back to the class, if anyone has any remarks or questions, I will be uploading the reflective the guidelines for reflective writing to support the forum, the discussion forum activity that will replace that will replace the last week last week's session. Yes, Reza.
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to ask about the deadline of the forum that we will need to fill individually.
Okay, the deadline of the forum. Let me just come back to this. Mm, mm, mm. Oh, it's not reflected here. So when should you do this forum? The forum is available today until the 28th of October at 7 p.m. I don't know why it doesn't. I'll just write it down here. And is available for access until the 28th. So like that. Yeah, 28th of October. So that's 2 weeks from now. You still have, I think you still have plenty of time to wrap up your assignment, accommodate any feedback should you receive any. After the during the presentation next week, and yeah, hopefully this particular activity will also help you or contribute to your assignment as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. Right. I take it that there may be no more questions for now. You may post your question. You may post your question with regarding any elements of the course materials here in the announcement section. So the announcement section is different to the forum. It's different to the diachronic forum discussion. In that this particular one is for general questions and general discussion. That one is specifically for the diachronic analysis group. Okay. I think, what time is it? The time is almost up, so thank you very much, everyone, for coming in today. Looking forward to seeing your presentations next week, and looking forward to anyone consulting with me in the coming few days. And have a great and enjoyable Friday, and have a wonderful weekend as well. So good morning, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, sir.